Roger Williams University is hosting a crisis management seminar on May 3rd at their Providence campus. Crises, whether a natural disaster, cyber attack, or financial instability, can have severe repercussions if not handled properly. This is where crisis management plays a pivotal role. Join Roger Williams MBA students and expert speakers to learn how to prepare for the unexpected. The program is totally free and open to the public. You can register online at rwu.edu/events/crisis-management-symposium.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
We did the Brian Crandell series that he's doing with everyone. And he came to my house, and my dog, Dottie, just like flomped over in the middle and then like wouldn't leave. And so it was like,
I like it.
I don't know how they're going to deal with that. But
well, it's like that in the pandemic, there was that famous video of some reporter or something.
The little
kid came in.
So
yeah,
good.
It was great. It's like, this is real. This is this moment. And it's funny because a lot of people tried to make their own Zoom setup at home and like make it look like they were in some super professional studio, and there's only so much that Amazon.com can do to alleviate the reality that you're in your house, and that's just how it's going to be.
My wife's a public defender, and like some of her stories of Zoom court with older lawyers who are just like, and there was the cat lawyer.
I was just going to say,
So that was, Katie was like, I mean, not exactly that level of hystericalness, but like, basically, that kind of thing was happening every day in the Fall River District Court.
It makes sense. Yeah, that cat video was amazing. And it's another example of like, hey, we made it through the pandemic at a certain level. We still are not out of it, obviously, but compared to where in fact, my Facebook memories are now serving me everything from 3 years ago. And it's like, oh, remember when parks were closed, and at one point I'd ordered like a mag light and like a giant press Velcro thing for a bulletproof vest. And I was like, where was my mind going at that point? But it kind of, at a moment, there was a moment where it really felt like this is going off the deep end. And I remember thinking, like, is there going to be a moment where Gina Raimondo stands up on the stage at the Vets or wherever it was at that point in time and says, we're going into this level, HEPCON, health protocol number 4. That means you can't leave your house. And the National Guard is going to pass out ham sandwiches. Let us know if you have dietary restrictions, and we'll throw one into your house. Talk about your experience in the pandemic, because that was kind of the moment where you had, I don't want to say disappeared, because that's not the right term at all, but you had gone sort of out of the public's eye after the lieutenant governor's race, and then a brief stint at City Hall.
So after the race in 2018, a lot of stuff professionally and personally. I went to law school, got my law degree, was doing a lot of work on climate litigation, working with the Sierra Club, working with the Center for Climate Integrity, on supporting court cases to hold big oil companies accountable for their environmental and climate crimes. This last year, I've been doing a judicial clerkship in the U.S. District Court for the District of Rhode Island, getting an understanding of how our judicial system actually works, and the ways that power imbalances can function in our legal system on a sort of daily level, and also. On the personal level, my wife and I had a child. We had a pandemic baby, and man, he just turned 2 weeks ago, which is wild to me how fast it goes. Like everyone's always like, it goes so fast, and you hear that, and you're like, that's got to be a cliche, and then it's like, holy cow, man, it goes fast. But that it does kind of put things into stark relief. Like I spend a lot of time thinking about the kind of world and planet and country that my son's going to inherit, and I think that's a big motivator for me getting in this race for sure.
Yeah, and there's so many ways to look at that, and we can go through like the principal areas, some of which have been kind of flagship policies or positions or philosophies that you've had in your public service life. But I guess let's back up. walk us through. David Cicilline announces that he's going to go work for the Rhode Island Foundation as the executive director, date certain of June 1st. And that triggers this flurry of pretty much everybody. Take every name that you can think of in Rhode Island politics, divide it in 3, and that's the number of people that were either exploring a run for Congress or came right out of the gate and said they were running for Congress.
Yeah, I mean, are you getting in? Like,
well, you know what?
May as well.
Maybe
everyone else is.
I can just interview myself here. Go run back and forth between the 2 chairs. Why not? We'll have a 29-person.
Bugs Bunny. Yeah.
Totally. But what was that moment for you? Because you had taken on this clerkship, and there's been some criticism that you had this clerkship and you left it semi-abruptly to run for Congress. Walk us through that experience and what led you to that decision. You weren't there, so to speak, on day one on Twitter saying, I'm thinking about running for Congress. It seemed like it was a little bit more of an intentional, thought-out decision.
Yeah, I was not one of these folks that was right off the bat, getting into it. I was initially actually pretty actively thinking, I'm not thinking about this. Mm-hmm. I think I was not disappointed. David Cicilline, I think, has been doing great work, and he's been putting a lot of himself into the fight for a long time, and he deserves to figure out what makes the most sense for him. But I was concerned because I think he has been a really effective advocate on a lot of issues that matter. Defending Social Security and Medicare from attacks from Republicans, protecting queer and trans folks, working for gun safety legislation, leading the charge to break up corporate monopolies like that. He's really been the energy and force behind that movement. And so I think we've been really fortunate in Rhode Island to have an advocate like that. And I think we need to make sure that we continue to have someone who's going to be helping to lead those fights. I think we need more leaders in Congress who have a record of winning real change for working families. The attacks that are coming from Republicans right now on our democracy, on our rights, on our future, like, the stakes are high. And I think to take that on, we need folks who can organize, who can bring people together and build coalitions strong enough to overcome those entrenched interests. And that's been the work that I've been doing in Rhode Island for a while. From my time in the state legislature, when I was first elected in 2014, I remember hearing all the time, that'll never happen, right? Like,
sure.
A lot of people said we would never pass paid sick days. Too many corporate interests lined up against it. But we were able to bring people together, bring workers, unions, small businesses. And in 2017, that paid sick leave passed. Over 100,000 Rhode Islanders able to start caring for a loved one or recovering from an illness without having to worry about losing pay from work. And so that kind of work of folks say that can't happen, let's figure out how to make it happen. I heard a lot of that when I was up there, when I was whether it was introducing legislation to increase the minimum wage for tip workers for the first time in 20 years in our state, or to expand harm reduction strategies, to reform solitary confinement in our prisons, to create new clean energy programs. Like, in each of those cases, there are some significant obstacles. It was about organizing and getting folks together and making it happen. And I think that's the kind of thing we need more of in Congress. That's the work that I want to do. I on the clerkship question, I can't speak to specific conversations that happen in judicial chambers, but
sure.
I can say that my judge, Mary McElroy, is an incredible judge, but also boss, and she was incredibly encouraging to say, you should be doing what you think is right, and certainly assured that there would, that from a work perspective, the team was going to be okay. So left a couple months early to explore this because the neutrality of our judicial system is really important, and I wanted to make sure that not having any political questions or political conversations while you're serving in the judiciary.
Right.
So yeah, I think the stakes on this race are pretty high, and I'm excited to be involved and be engaged in some of these conversations.
Congressional District 1, I mean, look, I don't remember the exact number, and it does obviously fluctuate, but it's a heavily leaning Democratic district. There's really no question about it. I mean, we see that reflected in the lack of any Republican getting in, at least this go around. Perhaps in a year when the next general election takes place, somebody will, but it's a Democratic district. But at the same time, it's a very varied district. What happens in Tiverton in terms of politics is a lot different than what happens in Newport. It's a lot different than what happens in Providence or Pawtucket. How do you weave that, or I should say, how do you thread that needle because look, everyone who knows you is going to say, oh, you're a progressive, and that is just the soundbite way of looking at things. What's your appeal to the person in Tiverton right now who has some concerns about their Second Amendment rights or whatever the case is? How do you speak to that voter and say, hey, I can represent you, I can represent Congressional District 1 thoroughly without necessarily just representing the philosophies and the things that I've learned and the things that I specifically believe in? What's that balance?
I there's a lot of forces in our country, in our state right now that want to create divisions. But in my experience, most people in whatever communities they are in Rhode Island, they're dealing with the same issues, and they've got basically the same values, right? They want what's best for their community, for their family. I saw that when I ran in 2018 statewide, and we spent a year just hanging out in every town in the state, and you hear the same conversations. I think right now, whether you're in Tiverton or Providence or Woonsocket, folks are, they're dealing with cost of living. They're dealing with housing prices going up. They're dealing with drug prices going up. They're dealing with energy prices going up. So I think there's some common threads there, which is that massive corporations are making record profits right now, like literally historical profits, right? While all of us are paying more, and it's hurting our pocketbook. It's hurting our capacity to be there for our families. And I think those are largely federal problems, and we need folks in Congress who are ready to take on big pharma, are ready to take on Wall Street, are ready to take on big oil, not for like ideological reasons, but for sort of basic pocketbook security for people who need it right now.
Yeah.
I do, and I think I also think that even on some of the quote unquote controversial issues, there's a lot of common ground. Most people who believe in the Second Amendment everyone who believes in the Second Amendment wants their kids to be safe in
Right.
school. Most people believe in basic gun safety policies, like having a national gun registry, like having liability for gun manufacturers. It's the one industry that somehow has been completely exempted from the effects of its products, and that doesn't make any sense. I think most people agree to some level that a woman's healthcare decisions belong to that woman, and they're a matter for their family and their doctor, not for politicians to get involved. And so, yeah, I mean, I think my record is as a fighter on a lot of these issues.
Mm-hmm.
I care about them, and I'm upfront about what I care about. But I think that these are fights that all of us have a stake in. Climate is another really good example. Whether you're in Providence and you're dealing this summer with like crazy record heat that happened last summer, that's happening again.
That's happening today.
That's happening today. That's got like seniors, alone in their homes, sweating, getting unhealthily warm. Whether you're whether you're on the East Bay and you've got the highway that's like already starting to get flooded,
right.
And that's going to be underwater in not too long. Whether we're dealing with air quality control that just, that impacts the health and lungs and asthma of our kids. Again, the health of our future, the cleanliness of our air and water, those aren't ideological issues. Those are things that all of us have a big stake in, except for like certain really powerful entrenched corporate interests that we need folks who are willing to call out and go to toe to toe against, right? The fossil fuel industry, that is the most powerful, profitable industry in the history of humankind. They have basically infinite resources to throw into corporate lobbyists and campaign contributions. And to be able to take that on, we need folks who can organize and can, find unlikely allies, build those coalitions, and have a record of actually getting real significant policy passed. And I think that's the record that I bring to the table in this race.
It's almost like, and I think more people are starting to wake up to this. Certainly Gen Z, certainly our millennial generation is well aware of this. And we've had the proof's been in the pudding, right? Grew up in the 90s and experienced at least some element of America's great and everything's going wonderfully, and whatever. The cash flow problems were certainly there, but what for the average person, but it wasn't the same as it is now. 9/11 happens. The recession in 2008, right? Even you could argue even earlier, the dot-com bubble bursting, the housing crisis that ensued. You've got all of these political divisions with Trumpism and so on and so forth, and then the pandemic, and now the ensuing financial crisis from that, and the housing crisis, and just the general day-to-day experience. People are starting to feel and identify that something's off here, something's amiss. This isn't pure capitalism. This isn't the vision of the city on the hill that the United States was built on. Obviously, there's a lot of negative things that you can look at in U.S. history, and we could go through those for 5.5 hours and still miss most of them. But the fundamental concept of prosperity has been thwarted, and people are starting to think, I think, more objectively about this idea of a lot of these wedge issues, a lot of these culture war issues, this garbage, whether it's, some school has a litter box for kids who wear cat ears or whatever other ridiculous idea there is, or these more big picture questions around a woman's right to have her own healthcare managed internally. This isn't so much about a left-right thing. This is about an us versus them thing. The us is the vast majority of us, and the them is, as you said, a very small collection of interests. And it's almost like political party now just sort of reflects culture war positions. And even sometimes the Democratic Party, in fact, oftentimes you can make an argument that they are a party that champions the business class more so than the people. So you're kind of in this position where you're fighting for, or you're trying to get votes as a Democrat, but at the same time, some of what you're speaking about, you really have to go in and push against the Democratic Party and some of their decision-making process, whether it's on drilling, relationships with pharmaceutical industry, relationships with big banks, you name it, military-industrial complex. I mean, you name it. Like, I feel like we're going through a Noam Chomsky book right here, but basically that's where we're at, and there is a voter base that is aware of that now in a way that they definitely weren't 10 years ago. Talk about that and fighting kind of that dual path of, hey, I'm the best Democrat in this race, but also the Democrats have some problems that I want to address, because it sounds like that's where you're going.
Donald Trump ran on draining the swamp, right? And it was a really powerful line. And it was, I can't swear. It was BS, right? Because
Totally.
He got up there and he filled his administration with the swamp. And what did the one major policy accomplishment of that administration was cutting taxes massively on the wealthiest and the biggest corporations, right? Like classic swamp. But I think there was a reason that there was such a response to that, because there is like the system, people feel the system is rigged, and you know what? It is rigged in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I've seen that as a legislator. I saw that one of the biggest things I got from going to law school and getting my law degree is seeing the way that our legal system in so many ways is rigged, right? It's not just massive corporations that are up in Congress disproportionately writing the rules that affect them, but then they're the folks who have the most money to hire the biggest lawyers to prosecute their cases in our judicial system, whereas regular people, you can't hire a massive big law lawyer to support you right. when you get ripped off by a corporation. And so, I think that is the work we have ahead of us. I think getting to the culture war issue, there's that saying where you want to ask who benefits, right? And when I look at, there's a long history in this country of folks with the most power and amassed resources who want to keep that power and resources using things like racial division to separate regular working people so that there's not a stronger united front in solidarity for the kinds of changes that we actually need. I think we see that with immigration. Like who benefits when we're fighting each other? It's the folks who are rigging the rules and writing the rules and making historic profits and taking that money out of our pockets. Yeah. I think the same goes with who benefits when we're talking about about some of these other social issues. Which is not to say that social issues aren't really important and we need to be standing up for people's rights. But it is to say that that there's a lot more that unites us than doesn't. And when we forget that, it's not regular people who benefit. It is the swamp that benefits.
Definitely. That's the fundamental tenet. I think it's going to continue to shift. And I think more and more people are starting to wake up to this idea. But those culture war issues are so prevalent. And I see it every day. My slice of humanity is kind of a variety in Rhode Island. I grew up here, so I have a connection to that random, everyday worker type person and those families. I have a connection to the artist and political activist type world. I have a connection to the conservative side of our state because they call WPRO and some of the things that people call up and offer before we even put them on the air. There's people who call up and I'm like, wow, putting you on the air would be dangerous. But you genuinely believe this because you say it every single day. So you wonder, yes, that framework's there, but there's got to be a moment where we start to shift away and people start to realize, okay, this idea that culture, quote unquote, is eroding the fabric of society. And therefore I have to take a stand and vote conservative because that's the only thing that's going to save the United States. It's the only thing that's going to save civilization, perhaps, when in reality, it's really a none of the above, but you're way better off voting Democrat if that's your position, because at least there's some effort to take on challenges with any number of autonomy issues and sort of at least approach taking care of the planet from a climate perspective. It's a shocking thing that some people are so caught up in certain culture issues that they're not willing to vote for their own interests. People are voting against their own best interests because of something that they believe is eroding the fabric of society.
Yeah, I think voters are smart, and I think a lot of the political consultant class likes to treat voters like they're not, but I think, people are smart. They're busy. Most people don't have the time to be paying attention to every political debate or turn that happens in the news. They're living their lives. They're working. They're trying to do right by their families. And again, I think the divisions that some people try to push are not helping us. I'm a progressive. and I'm a patriot. Like, I love this country. To me, this is a country worth fighting for. It's a history of, like these incredibly beautiful ideals, and realities that very, very often don't meet those ideals, and people and movements and leaders and regular people again and again coming together and trying to fight to make the reality of our country closer to, those stirring words of, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, democracy, equality. And so I think some people, think that progressives don't love this country, but I've got an American flag. Like, this is a country for all of us, and we need to make it work for all of us. And we can, like, we have the power. We've done incredible things in this country. Things that today in our sort of broken political system, broken Congress, sound crazy. Like, you think about someone introducing Social Security or Medicare right now, right? I mean, I'm a supporter of Medicare for all. I think we need universal health care. That's been a fight I've been pushing for a while. And people, some people say that's too out there. Mm-hmm. But, like, that's what they said about Social Security. That's what they said about Medicaid. That's what they said about civil rights. That's what they said about the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. Like, we have times in the past, we've been confronted with huge issues. Air that was making us sick, water that was becoming so polluted, and folks came together and were able to overcome the interests that were blocking change and pass these big legal frameworks that have made a huge difference for people. Yeah. We can do that. That's not impossible. I'm not like naively optimistic. I understand the challenges. But I cut my legislative teeth in a chamber dominated by someone named Nicholas Mattiello. You might remember him. It was not an easy place to be a young progressive trying to get, some good things through. But I was able to figure out how to navigate that system and find unlikely allies and make some significant policy victories happen. And I think that that's possible in Congress as well, but we need folks who are gonna prioritize that work and have a record of actually winning real change.
Yeah, unlikely allies. That's a huge piece, and we've seen some of that really take place here this year in our own legislature, where there's, again, whether it's Republican, Democrat, whether it's within intra-party conversations or pieces of legislation that are coming from people who are more progressive or more conservative. That's how government functions. And that leads me to my next question. And I'll put this out there kind of in that, with that being the framework, not so much in the framework of respond to this person that said something about you on Twitter or this person that said something about you on the radio or whatever. But I feel like this whole progressive civil war, which I made this T-shirt that said I survived the progressive civil war of 2022 with like a monster I drew on it. I was going to print them, and I was like, yeah, I don't want to advance this idea any further. But it's a thing. You have different, and it's for the 36,000-foot observer, or even sometimes embarrassingly commentator on Rhode Island politics. It's the progressives, capital T, capital P. Apparently, everybody's monolithic if you're, progressive in thought. But the reality is that there's a lot of different peer groups. There's a lot of different quote-unquote factions. There's a lot of different approaches. The DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, have a very different view on certain issues than the Working Families Party or than what used to be the Progressive Democrats, or maybe still is. I'm not sure if that group is still active. Or just the random person that has that agrees with many of the things that you or other progressives would put forth, but doesn't even have a political attribution. They're just a person, and they say, yeah, we should take care of the environment. Everyone should make a living wage. We should have health care for everybody. Health care is a human right, whatever it is. But we've gotten to this moment here in Rhode Island, which has it's not quite out of control, but it could very easily become out of control, and it's starting to pop up in this race where people have been Cynthia Mendes, former lieutenant governor candidate, former state rep, critical of you on Twitter and writing Twitter threads and one of the main criticisms is that as a white cis male, you ought not be in this race, that doing so is inherently not a progressive move, that you should clear space for somebody in this race who is a woman, who is anything other than a white cis male. What's your reaction to that, and how do you rally people around you and what you are, just in terms of nature? How do you make that? How do we get over this moment of? Because I understand the thought process. I mean, it makes perfect sense. I completely agree, and I think elevating as many diverse voices in any capacity is essential, and we don't do anywhere enough of it. The news media in Rhode Island, it's an embarrassing trait. We have mostly white men, mostly white folks. We have very minimal representation. That's a disaster that should be addressed. It hasn't been addressed. But in your case, what's your reaction to that criticism? Because it's there and it doesn't seem like it's going to go away.
I mean, I'm so excited to see so many different leaders stepping forward and putting their hat in this race and bringing so many different perspectives and experiences and identities to the table. Like that is, it's something to celebrate. I think it's a sign of a healthy democracy.
Sure.
And I'm super pumped about it. I think for me, what I bring, and everyone brings different things to the table. What I bring to the table in a race like this is 15 years of fighting to make a difference for everyday Rhode Islanders, whether it was as a community organizer in Providence, helping young people win real changes in our public schools, whether it was in the state legislature, building coalitions to pass laws to give working people paid sick days and higher wages and access to renewable energy, whether it's more recently using my law degree to support court cases to hold big oil companies accountable for their environmental crimes. So that, I mean, that's the record that I have and that I'm excited to be talking with voters about. Again, different people have different approaches, including in the progressive movement. And I think we need different approaches to win change. I mean, that was always my, one of the work I tried to do in the legislature was sort of think through, okay, what is the outside game, right? What is the work that is pulling the conversation, creating more space for bigger, more ambitious wins? And then what's the inside game? What's the actual concrete work of moving something forward and doing all the things you need to do to actually get a policy through? And how do we bring folks together? How do we build collective power for a progressive agenda? When I was in the legislature, I organized the Fair Shot agenda. We got in 2017 and 2018, we got over 25 reps, which, by the way, is the number it takes to block a budget, to come together and stand behind a podium and say, this is our collective agenda. We want X, Y, and Z, which is something that hadn't really happened before. It's a lot easier to kind of keep people individualized and atomized. But for me, the focus is always like, what can we do to actually make some real changes that will impact real people's lives? Because folks need it. And different people have different approaches, and I think we need them all.
Mm-hmm. There's definitely something magical about the roster of candidates. I mean, look, I've been killing him left and right. So Alan Waters, I mean, other than him, I mean, let's be honest about it. That guy. Come on. First of all, he's not going to make the debates, I don't think. Second of all, if he does, I mean, what's he doing there? But
I don't know how debates are going to work with like 400 people. It's going to be going to be a challenge for all of you folks.
We were thinking about it. I mean, we'll see what happens at the filing deadline. We'll see who's in. Are we going to do the 2-tier? Like all right, Group A is up now, and Group B is up now. I couldn't imagine doing a debate with 10 people. We did a debate for governor with 5 people, and that was a challenge. Yeah. And some people found that. At least the debate I moderated for the primary, some people found that it was like the radio format allowed for a lot more space, so to speak, than TV, where it's like, okay, is it like, all right, 3, 2, 1. Okay, boom. Sorry, Jeopardy's not on tonight. Wheel of Fortune neither. But so sit here and watch this, and you have like these really segmented type of approaches. With radio, you still have a time limit, but it's a little bit looser and a little bit more able to flow. But on TV, I couldn't imagine how they're going to. I mean, 10 podiums. It's going to be 15 podiums, whatever it is. Last couple of minutes here, I want to talk about, like, you know, it seems a little early to get into the head-to-head matchup type thing. You know, it's like, oh, man, what's your strategy against, you know, John Gonzalez or whatever? So it's almost like, why even bring that up? Because you'd have to go through, I'm sure you have an understanding of how each of the credible, and I mean that in terms of likely to have any impact on the bottom number of the election, candidates would perform one-on-one with you or in a 3 or 5 or 7-way vote. I mean, look, I think right now it's pretty clear that you and Sabina Matos are in many ways the front runners. Gabe Amo gets in this thing. I think that changes it to a 3-way race in terms of those at the top. But don't underestimate Quezada. Don't underestimate Kano. Don't underestimate really anybody that's in this race. Carlson gets in. He dumps $1 million in. All of a sudden, that becomes a factor. It could be a shocker. I'm sure Gonzalez, has a lot of appeal from different portions of not only the city, but he's starting to make a name for himself outside. He's probably more of a mayoral track, if you're being honest about it. At the same time, he's there. You never know if Don Grebian's going to get in. I mean, at the last minute, somebody else could get in. So how do you take a deep breath and say, this race, I'll phrase it as a question, actually, that's more nuanced. Is this race about Aaron Regunberg, or is this race about, for you, or is this race about Aaron Regunberg versus Sabina Matos, versus Gabe Amo, versus XYZ, any of those other candidates? How do you balance that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I squint to hear that the front runner, because I've always felt more comfortable in like the under. I ran against an incumbent in 2018.
Sure, you raised 150,000. You've run statewide before. You've been, you're a figure that is unlike Anna Quezada or Makita Barnes or somebody like that very few people have heard of. People have seen your name on a ballot on a statewide basis, and you came within a percentage point of defeating the incumbent Lieutenant Governor, now Governor Dan McKee. So
yeah, I'm always going to run as an underdog. I think we've got a strong path. I think I think we built in 2018 a network of statewide volunteers and friends and supporters, and that gives us some organizing infrastructure. I've always been an organizer. I think in a race like this, it comes down to ground game largely. And so I think we're gonna build an effective organization. We're gonna do that work, and I think we've got a path. I think the message that we've been talking about today, that I'm going to be running on, is one that a lot of Rhode Islanders are excited about. We saw that in 2018. Didn't quite make it, but I think we confounded a lot of expectations when we won 49% against a longtime incumbent who had a lot of establishment support behind him, a lot of outside money coming in. For me, it's always what's our vision and what's our record. I think there's other great people in the race. I'm excited to be in the race with them. I'm not going to be talking about them. I think I'm going to be talking about the fights that we want to be a part of, to take on Big Pharma and Wall Street and Big Oil and fight for a woman's sacred right to make her own healthcare decisions, and stand up for seniors against the attacks on Medicare and Social Security and everything else, and continue Congressman Cicilline's fight for like the basic foundations of our democracy, which we know are really under threat right now. And so I think it's a question of are folks excited by someone who has a record of coming together, bringing people together, and building coalitions and winning some real significant change. And that's the work we're going to be doing over the next few months.
Have you ever had any sleepless nights thinking about very close to defeating Dan McKee in 2018? Governor Raimondo becomes Commerce Secretary. That opens up. You could have been governor right now, or do you just have you moved on from that? Because that seems like that's a stinging defeat. You spent a lot of money. You spent a lot of effort. You took a swing, and it's I hate to say swing and a miss, because that's not that implies that you did a terrible job. But it's at the same time you gave it your all, and you came up just shy of likely becoming lieutenant governor. I mean, let's be honest, that primary was the race, and Governor McKee is now then Lieutenant Governor McKee is now the governor. You ever think about that, or is it something you've just kind of moved on from?
I mean, you move on. I definitely, you're right. I put my all into that race. That's something that has always been my approach. Like, when there's something that seems important, I'm going to give literally everything I got. I will say, in that race, I didn't have a 2-year-old son, so I'm going to be giving my all to this race, but I'm going to be doing it in a way that makes sure that I am able to spend as much time with my child, because it's like, man, it's so much fun. I just freaking love it. But I definitely moved on and figured out a path, and I think a way of having an impact outside of politics. I was not expecting this. This was not something I was planning for at all. But I do think it's we've had a really effective progressive advocate in David Cicilline, and it's really important that we continue to have someone who's going to be doing that work in Washington.
Aaron Regunberg is running for Congress, one of 3,295 people in the Democratic primary, and look forward to another podcast, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you at the debate. I have a feeling you're gonna get into this thing. It's not just a tease, and my guess is that you're gonna file, and it's gonna happen.
It was a blast to be here. Thanks so much, Bill.
Yeah,
Appreciate
my pleasure.
it.
This episode is brought to you by the University of Rhode Island Online, who are offering a cannabis certificate program. The legalization of recreational cannabis that went into effect last year can open doors for your career. If you're already in the industry or wondering what is the best path to break into the cannabis field, the University of Rhode Island has a program to help you become highly competitive in numerous areas of the cannabis industry. Fully accredited by URI's College of Pharmacy, the certificate program is 100% online, and it can be completed in just 2 semesters. Learn more by visiting uri.edu/online/cannabis or give them a call at 401-874-5280.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.